Egypt has just walked away from the negotiating table. After years of tense diplomacy over the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Cairo has declared, negotiations are over. The dam, they say, is illegitimate. But here's the question no one is asking. Who actually loses when Egypt quits talking? Does Ethiopia even need these negotiations? For years, Ethiopian officials traveled to summit after summit, meeting after meeting, investing time and resources into discussions that yielded little progress. Meanwhile, the dam rose higher. The turbines began to spin. The lights came on across Ethiopia. So what exactly did Ethiopia gain from all those negotiations? And now that Egypt has chosen silence over dialogue, what leverage does Cairo have left? The Nile River, cradle of ancient civilizations, source of life for over 400 million people. Flowing from the Ethiopian highlands, where 86% of its water originates, through Sudan's plains, to Egypt's densely populated valley, this river has sustained nations for millennia. But today, it's at the center of a standoff that could reshape the future of northeastern Africa. This is the story of water, power, and two countries facing a moment of truth. Construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam began in 2011. With a price tag of $5 billion, the project promised to transform Ethiopia, a nation where 2/3 of the population still lacks reliable electricity. The dam's massive reservoir, holding 74 billion cubic meters of water, would generate 5,150 megawatts of clean energy, powering homes, factories, and dreams of economic growth. For Ethiopia, the Renaissance Dam represents self-determination, funded domestically without relying on foreign loans. But 3,000 kilometers downstream, Egypt watches with growing concern. The Nile provides 97% of Egypt's fresh water, irrigating nearly all its farmland and sustaining over 100 million people. For Cairo, any reduction in flow threatens catastrophe. Egypt points to agreements from 1929 and 1959, colonial-era treaties that allocated 55.5 billion cubic meters annually, while granting Ethiopia nothing. These treaties, signed when Britain controlled the region, gave Egypt virtual veto power over upstream projects. For Ethiopia, they represent an outdated imperial legacy that denied African nations sovereignty over their own resources. The diplomatic clash reached a new level of intensity in recent months. In December, Ethiopia launched a sharp attack on Egypt in a statement from its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, describing Cairo officials as being influenced by a colonial-era mentality and believing in their monopoly over Nile waters. Ethiopia insists that no nation needs permission to develop resources within its own borders, invoking the UN Watercourses Convention, which calls for equitable use of shared rivers. Egypt's response was equally forceful. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati declared in a recent statement that the Renaissance Dam is a unilateral measure by Ethiopia and it is illegal and violates international law. He went further, stating bluntly that the negotiation track has reached a dead end. For Abdelati, the dam itself is illegitimate. He affirmed Egypt's right to defend its water rights in accordance with international law, calling water security an existential threat. These words echoed an earlier October statement from President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who warned that Egypt will not stand idly by in the face of Ethiopia's approach and will take every necessary measure to protect its interests and water security. The divide is now stark. Upstream nations want modern governance based on equity. Egypt maintains that the Renaissance Dam violates international law and that negotiations are finished. In September 2025, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was officially inaugurated. The years-long filling process is complete, with the reservoir having been filled 5 times by September 2024, reaching a level of 638 meters above sea level. Today, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is fully operational. Its 13 turbines, generating electricity for millions of Ethiopian homes. But inauguration marked the beginning of a new phase of tension, not its end. Ethiopia now manages the dam day to day, releasing water based on inflow levels, operating spillways when necessary, and regulating downstream flow. This is precisely what Egypt feared. Cairo has complained that the flow is no longer uniform, that Ethiopia controls the river's rhythm. Egyptian officials argue that irregular releases disrupt their own water management, affect irrigation schedules, and create uncertainty for farmers who have relied on predictable Nile floods for millennia. Sudan, caught between its giant neighbors, has experienced both the benefits and risks of the dam firsthand. While the Renaissance Dam offers potential advantages for irrigation and electricity, uncontrolled releases pose serious threats. In October 2025, the opening of GERD sluices flooded areas along Sudan's Rosaires River, forcing Ethiopia to reduce discharge to 300 million cubic meters per day to avert a larger disaster. For Khartoum, this incident illustrated the vulnerability of being downstream from a dam it cannot control. For Ethiopia, this is simply dam operation. When heavy rains swell the reservoir, excess water must be released. When inflows decrease, releases adjust accordingly. It is technical management, not political manipulation. But for Egypt and Sudan, every fluctuation is evidence that their water security now rests in Ethiopian hands. Yet some analysts see a deeper strategy at play. According to this theory, Egypt is no longer truly fighting against the Renaissance Dam itself. The dam is complete, operational, a fait accompli. Instead, Cairo's continued protests serve a different purpose: to establish precedent for future projects. The Blue Nile, or Abe as Ethiopians call it, could support additional dams. Ethiopia has vast hydroelectric potential yet to be tapped. By keeping the Renaissance Dam framed as a sovereignty threat, by maintaining international attention on the dangers of unilateral dam construction, Egypt hopes to constrain Ethiopia's future development. If the Renaissance Dam is portrayed as reckless, if Ethiopia is seen as ignoring downstream concerns, then any future Ethiopian dam project on the Abe starts from a position of international suspicion. Egypt, according to this view, is playing a long game, not fighting today's battle, but tomorrow's. Ethiopia's response is unequivocal. Officials in Addis Ababa insist they will not ask permission from any nation to develop resources within their own borders. Sovereignty, they argue, is non-negotiable. If additional projects make economic and technical sense, if they serve Ethiopia's development needs, they will proceed. The message is clear. The Grand Renaissance Dam was the first major project, but it may not be the last. Egypt's strength lies in diplomacy, alliances within the Arab League, influence at the United Nations, and economic partnerships across the region. But what if diplomacy fails? Some in Cairo have occasionally hinted at military options, though such talk remains largely rhetorical. The reality makes such action highly unlikely for multiple reasons. First, there is the dam itself. As one Ethiopian expert noted, the dam will protect itself. With 74 billion cubic meters of water held behind its walls, any attack on the dam would unleash catastrophic flooding downstream, devastating Sudan and parts of Egypt itself. The dam is, in effect, a deterrent by its very existence. Second, Ethiopia has not stood still. Over recent years, the country has invested heavily in modernizing its military capabilities, expanding both the size and technological sophistication of its armed forces. New equipment, training programs, and defense partnerships have strengthened Ethiopia's security posture. Any military confrontation would carry significant risks and uncertain outcomes. Finally, the international community would almost certainly condemn military action. The African Union, the United Nations, and bodies have consistently called for peaceful resolution to isolate Egypt diplomatically and could trigger broader regional instability. Ethiopia's diplomatic tone has evolved. Recent statements from Foreign Minister Gideon Timotheos are direct, shedding the careful language of earlier years. He speaks of monopolistic claims and challenges the legitimacy of treaties Ethiopia never signed. This boldness reflects achievement. Renaissance Dam is operational, generating power and providing Ethiopia with both energy independence and regional leverage. Egyptian media has reacted sharply, calling the language aggressive and accusatory. Parliamentarian Mustafa Bakri insisted Ethiopia misrepresents Cairo's legitimate defense of legal rights. But for regional observers, Ethiopia's clarity marks a turning point. The ambiguity is gone. The dam exists, it operates. Any future negotiations must acknowledge this reality. Egypt's surprise at Ethiopia's firmness is perhaps understandable. For decades, Cairo controlled the Nile narrative. The river was Egypt's lifeline, and upstream projects were threats to be blocked. Colonial-era treaties supported this position. But Ethiopia's determination changed everything. By funding Renaissance Dam domestically, mobilizing its own workforce, and weathering international pressure, Ethiopia built more than a dam. It built a symbol of African agency and self-reliance. Egypt's recent decision to quit negotiations entirely raises a fundamental question. Who actually loses in this scenario? Does Ethiopia even need these negotiations in the first place? The reality on the ground suggests otherwise. GERD stands complete and operational. Its turbines generate power. The reservoir is full. Ethiopia has achieved what it set out to do, despite years of diplomatic pressure and delayed negotiations. For Addis Ababa, the lengthy negotiation process has been, in many ways, a drain on time and resources with little tangible progress to show for it. What leverage does Egypt retain now? Diplomatic isolation of Ethiopia seems difficult given growing African solidarity with upstream nations. Security Council resolutions have limited effect on operational realities. Economic pressure faces challenges as Ethiopia has cultivated relationships with China, Turkey, and Gulf nations. And military action, as we've discussed, carries risks that likely outweigh any conceivable benefit. Yet walking away from dialogue serves no one's long-term interests. For Sudan and Egypt, avoiding discussions doesn't change what exists. The dam operates, the water flows according to Ethiopian management decisions. Egypt's refusal to engage may feel like a strong stance, but it surrenders any remaining influence over how that management occurs. Perhaps it's time for Cairo to reconsider its course of action and return to the table with tangible proposals rather than historical grievances. After all, Ethiopia is not just another nation in the Nile basin, it is the source of 86% of the river's water. When discussing the Nile or the Abyei, Ethiopia is the country that matters most. Any sustainable solution must include Ethiopian participation, Ethiopian interests, and Ethiopian sovereignty. The choice facing Egypt is stark. Continue isolation and lose any voice in the Renaissance Dam's operation, or accept the new reality and negotiate practical arrangements for data sharing, flood warnings, and coordinated management. Ethiopia has indicated openness to cooperation on these practical matters, but it will not negotiate away what it has already built, nor will it seek permission for future development within its borders. As the sun sets over the Ethiopian highlands, where the Blue Nile begins its long journey to the Mediterranean, the path forward becomes clearer. The dam exists. No amount of diplomatic protest will change that. The question is not whether Ethiopia will operate the Renaissance Dam, it will. The question is whether Egypt chooses partnership or continued confrontation. Making peace with Ethiopia, the nation that controls the river's source, isn't weakness, it's wisdom. For HornAfrica Insight, thank you for watching.